The last artist I wanted to look at as part of the 19th century is Paul Cézanne. And even though I know technically this image happens in the 20th century, he is really still considered the last of the 19th century painters. And Cézanne is significant because he sort of breaches the gap between the early modernism that's happening in the latter part of the 19th century and the styles that are going to develop in the early 20th century up till about 1950 or so. Um, while Manet started us with the flattening of the canvas, Cézanne really takes it to the next step. If you look at his image, The Large Bathers, which is actually located here in Philadelphia, if you ever want to go see it, we have defined spaces, but really an ultimately very flattened canvas. The sense of depth is pretty minimal. The covering of the canvas is pretty slim, so you actually can see the canvas through the colors in the background. Um, the figures themselves are not highly realistic. They're elongated. They're fairly geometric in shape. If you look at the overall canvas, the whole thing is shaped like a triangle, which is a traditional way of forming a picture, but the way it's done here sort of frames these women to make them kind of the focal point. But we can't really see the women. They aren't necessarily the stereotypical beautiful women that we might expect in a painting. Um, they aren't necessarily aware of our presence in the way that the Olympia or the woman in Déjeuner sur l'herbe were, but they're flat. They seem to be right at the front of the canvas, almost in our space. And there's something about this that really speaks to a lot of early 20th century artists. They see that Cézanne has sort of freed the canvas for them to start playing with perspective and three-dimensionality. And when we talk about Cubism, you'll see actually a pretty strong correlation between Cubism and what Cézanne is doing. So definitely a real marker of the transition from the late 19th century into the early 20th century.